Hey, this is Matthew Ricks, and today on the Music Business Newsletter, you ever met someone who wants to break into the music industry? Not as an artist, but as an interviewer? Well, I got an email from a 24-year-old in North Dakota who wants to give me some stiff competition in interviewing artists. And he's wondering if he needs to pack up, leave the frozen tundra of North Dakota for greener pastures in New York or Los Angeles or Nashville to make it happen. So let's talk about that. But before we dive in, if you have a question on the music industry that you would like for me to answer, just go to MatthewRicks.com, click submit your question. Absolutely free. I don't need you to become a member or join a Patreon or buy a book or book me as a private coach or any of that nonsense. Just go to MatthewRicks.com and click submit your question. Now for today's email. He says, hello, Matt. My name is Bob, and I'm 24, and I'm reaching out because I'm wanting to get into interviewing artists for a while now, kind of like what you do. He says, funny enough, I actually didn't find you through the Mattrix Minute, but through the interviews you've done with different artists. Well, I welcome everybody. We started first doing the Mattrix Minutes, and then I got into interviewing artists just because I was working with these artists, and I just wanted to give them a different platform because I was interviewing a lot of punk bands at the time. And a lot of people who interview punk bands, they're just, it's a lot of them do good work, but some of them are just absolutely brutal to listen to. And then I got into interviewing Christian artists and Christian hip hop artists, and it was kind of the same thing. It was like, a lot of these guys just asked the same questions. And I wanted the artist I work with or my friends or artists that I believed in to be able to have clips of them not being on script, to be able to take with them to post on their own. And because I do have a rapport with a lot of these guys, it made for some really great interviews, and it did some really cool numbers, and a lot of artists got some really cool traction from it. But the email continues. He says, I've watched a ton of your interviews, and I love how you get people to open up and actually talk, just not promote. When I have done interviews with artists, I like to ask them questions. I'm always aiming for them to go somewhere in the ballpark of, that's a really good question. Or, man, I got to think about that one. I always want them to do that. You got a lot of times where you'll interview artists and their publicist or their manager goes, submit the questions ahead of time. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And they'll be like, how come? And I'm like, because I don't want them to be scripted. I want them to be real. And then they'll be like, well, how long are you going to give us? As long as the interview runs. I've had some artists not do an interview with me because I want to submit the questions ahead of time. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. He continues in the email, you've got a way of making it feel more like a conversation than an interview. I do that with everybody in my life. Like I think some of the times with people doing interviews, like interviewers, radio DJs are the same way. They don't really like people. It's just not their personality to really like just find people fascinating. I find people fascinating. I always have. I will talk to anybody. I can go to the gas station by my house. They know who I am because I try to make an impression with everybody I come in contact with. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but at least it's an impression. So his email continues, and that's exactly what I want to learn how to do. Not just interview, but have a conversation. Practice on people who don't make you nervous. Practice on people who, you're not starstruck with. I was talking to adults when I was 10 years old. And so now when I do get to talk to artists that I'm kind of like, well, this is really cool, or they're pretty big or whatever, it's just a conversation for me. I actually had one of the guys I go to church with who was with me at a festival recently, and he saw me hanging out with the artist, and he said that, Matthew is the same hanging out with artists as he is at church or serving or at the coffee shop. And that was kind of one of the highest compliments that somebody could pay me, is that it's just like, I'm this same way all the time, which is just, you just got to love people and you just find people fascinating. His email continues. Here's where I'm at. I live in North Dakota. Boy, I bet it gets cold in the winter there. He says, which isn't exactly a hub for the music industry. I don't think it's anything for the music industry, but maybe a stop on a really badly booked tour. He says, but I've been thinking a lot about whether I should move to Nashville, New York, or LA. Don't do that. To really make this interview thing happen. part of me feels like I don't get around where the action is. Well, I live in Nashville, and I don't go where the action is. I said this in a video, I don't know, a few weeks ago. I am the world's worst networker. I am the world's worst networker. I don't go to industry stuff. If I'm going to hang out with an artist, we're going to probably go have lunch or coffee. I just don't. The action doesn't really impress me too much. He says that he's afraid that he'll just be stuck spinning his wheels out there in North Dakota. Bruh, you ever heard of the internet? You don't need to be. Actually, it probably works to your advantage that you're not in one of those three cities. But let's continue with the email. He says, I've been trying to reach out to artists already. Very good. Even some big name ones. And another one, crash and burns. He says, I've emailed their managers, DM'd a few of them, filled out contact forms on websites, and yeah, not a single one has replied. He says, I get it. I'm not a known name and I don't have a platform yet, but it's tough to know how to get on their radar without coming across as pushy or desperate. So let's break down this paragraph. You said you've emailed their managers, DM'd a few, filled out contact forms on websites, and not a single one of them has replied. That happens. That happens. Even some of my friends have not gotten back to me. And I'm like, what the crap? And they're just like, oh, sorry, dude. Like, I was busy or whatever. And then they'll be like, yeah, I'll do it. It's fine. Whatever. I'm like, I'm trying to help you. What do you mean you'll do it? You should be excited to talk to me. I would be if I was you. But anyways, it's not about having a known name. What you need to do is start getting some social proof. And you did say that you've been reaching out to artists already, even some big names. You're not going to get the big names. They don't know who you are. You don't have artists always. And when I would even now, when I interview artists that we don't know each other, but maybe I did come across their music and I was like, yeah, I want to give you some free promo. There's always that first initial, they're nervous. They're nervous of like, am I going to like ask them what their opinion is on tariffs or something like that, which I don't get into any of that stuff, but they're always nervous. And what you have to realize is that because you're not a known name, and neither am I, like you're gonna have to work your way up. When it comes to you being afraid of coming across as pushy or desperate, dude, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Like, be pushy. I got to shout out Brendan Burke with the Christian Music Bro podcast. He is relentless on hitting people up for interviews. And he's gotten in Christian music, he's gotten some pretty good size interviews. And the reason being is because he will freaking send you 10 messages until you will reply just to get this kid off your back. I don't think anybody thinks he's desperate. I think everybody thinks he's very excited and motivated. So if you're worried about coming across as pushy or desperate, the great thing about starting off is you're not on anybody's radar. Nobody right here is expecting anything from you. So you don't come across as desperate. I mean, if you're like begging, which I wouldn't, but if you're just like, hey, I really want to talk to you. I really think we could have a great interview. I'd really love to introduce my audience to, your music or your story. And they might not get it because, some artists just get tons of messages. If you're going to DM a female artist about an interview, I bet that woman, if she's an attractive woman, she's getting 100 messages a day on Instagram. So you have to just be relentless in that pursuit of that interview. I would start off with smaller artists because I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes a smaller artist actually will do better for you. Like I'm doing right now, I'm doing these like new artist showcases on this channel. And I'm just interviewing, artists with 800 monthly listeners on Spotify. Well, my watch time on those interviews is crazy. Why? Because they got, it might be their first interview. So everybody in their community, all their friends, all the exes and the family, they're all going to watch the interview. And then you can be in a situation like where I was 2 years ago. I interviewed the punk band, the Dollheads, because they played Punk Rock Bowling and Music Festival. And I did the interview and I posted it and nobody cared. Well, now they just got signed and they just released something with Fat Mike from No Effects, the interview's popping off 2 years later. Why? Because people are looking for information on the dial hits. So I would go with up and coming artists because one, it's going to be easier to work with. Two, it actually makes you a better interviewer because you have to deep dive, and you just can't go type in their name in Google and get a bunch of information. But you're going to have to deep dive how to do a good interview. Three, you're going to get a lot of watch time from it. And four, if that artist pops off, people will always go back to that interview because it was like the first one. So he's got a couple of questions for me. So let's answer them and help him out. He says, my questions are, number one, is moving out to one of the bigger music cities really necessary to get started in this kind of work? Not at all. Not at all. You do not need to move to LA, Nashville, New York. You don't have to do it. Like I said, you not being in here probably might help you, because if everybody sees you just kind of lurking around at industry events or trying to get in, it actually decreases your value. He also says, how do I actually get the attention of artists or their teams? Start small. Because you might have had artists who got your message and they went to your Instagram and they didn't find a YouTube channel. They didn't see you do any interviews. There's like no proof. And a bigger artist is not going to be put in a situation where they don't know what they're getting from you. So you got to build up your social proof. And the third question he has is, and when's the right time to start asking for interviews? Should I just start locally or keep shooting my shot for bigger names? I don't think you have to do locally. I mean, there's a huge gap between local North Dakota artists. You're going to interview local North Dakota artists. Was there like four? North Dakota, local North Dakota artists. Actually, you should do that. There's probably an untapped market. But there's a huge gap between local North Dakota artists and big name artists. You got the up and comers. You got the ones who are coming back down the mountain. You got C-level artists. You got low B artists. You don't have to go either Bismarck artist or Taylor Swift. There's a huge gap in between those two. And usually the artists in the C range and B, low Bs on their way up, they're going to be easy to work with. They're going to be super chill. If they have a manager, they're not going to run you through the ringers, like send us your questions and all that stuff. And they'll probably just give you a really good interview, and you'll probably get some super awesome watch time on it. He says, any advice you could share would mean a lot. I really want to do this the right way and not just chase clout. I mean, I'll be honest with you, like I've interviewed some bigger artists, and some of the interviews have never even been released because it was brutal. You take an artist who's been around for 20 years, the interviews just unless you're going to try to play gotcha game which if you play gotcha games, you have a very short shelf life interviewing artists, because words will get out and just nobody's going to mess with you. But I've interviewed artists who've been around for 20 years, and you might get 30 minutes with them, and you'll tap out at 12 because they just don't care anymore. Like, it's not that they're rude or they're jerks. It's just like they've done this for 20 years. You are nothing different than what they know. And they're just kind of like, let's get it over with. And they're usually not good interviews. And it's, once again, it's not that they're rude. It's just that if you don't want to answer the same question for 20 years, I'd hate to come on here and answer the same question for 20 years. To do this the right way, you got to work on your chops as well. You got to work on how you interview people. So maybe you do start local and just get some social proof. Work out what platform you want to use to record. And then figure out, is it going to be just video? Are you going to do audio? Is it just audio? Like, how do you do this? Don't ask the same questions that don't. If you ask one question, if you ask one artist this question, you got a list of questions that you ask that artist. Don't ask the same artist those questions, because it becomes very predictable for your audience. You want to build something that has purpose and brings real stories out of people like I do. Well, thank you for that. You got to just take an investment in people. People love talking about themselves. Okay. People love talking about themselves. And if you can break the ice with them, like one of my things is before I do an interview, I'll spend 15, 20 minutes off air talking with them. and just break the ice, get them warmed up, let them know that I'm not some weirdo or I'm some fanboy. And that's what I do with new artists. And I'll be honest with you, I've made some really good friends in the music industry by doing that ahead of time, because they know we're just kind of cool. Like, I'm just an equal. Like, if we go to have dinner in Nashville, I'm not going to be fanboying over it. If they give me their number, I've had artists who've given me their number, and then I barely, we won't text. I'm not texting them being like, oh, you're amazing or whatever. Like, no. So I would just start by, if you want to do something that builds purpose and has these artists break their character and just do real stories, then you have to just invest in them. And you have to take the time to let them open up and not just be firing questions off, the same questions they've answered 20 times. And if you work with an artist who's never had an interview before, you need to warm them up because they're going to be incredibly nervous in the beginning. He says, thanks for taking the time to read this and for all the content you put out. It's been super inspiring. Signed, Bob from North Dakota. Well, there you go, Bob. I mean, yeah, I would start, anybody who wants to interview artists. I'm kind of all over the map. Like, I've interviewed punk bands, I've interviewed ska bands, I've interviewed hardcore bands, I've interviewed oi bands, I've interviewed Christian artists, like contemporary Christian artists. I've interviewed Christian rappers. I've interviewed speakers. I've interviewed a chef. I've interviewed other podcasters, which we have a ton of interviews coming out here soon. I've been doing this week and next week. I'll be recording them. I don't really want to be pigeonholed as one, which also, heads up, it does mess with the algorithm. Because if you're interviewing nothing but punk bands and then you switch it up and go like Christian hip hop, which is on the complete other side of the spectrum, the algorithm really doesn't know what to do with you at that moment. So you do have to deal with that. Then if you really want to get crazy with the algorithm, start reading emails from people in the music industry and answering it on the same channel. Then the algorithm really has no clue. But you wait out the algorithm and you teach the algorithm what you're about instead of them deciding it. Yeah, I would just tell you, just start emailing any B and C level artists you can get. If they, they don't have to be signed. They don't have to have their song on the radio. A lot of these groups, man, they got such an underground following. I don't know what kind of genre of music you want to interview. I would tell you to not stick with just one genre. I would tell you to just open yourself up, to whatever inspires you and whatever comes your way. But also, if you really want to get your chops and you really want to get down interviewing, interview other podcasters, because they love to talk anyways, and they'll talk about themselves. And a lot of people don't interview podcasters, so you can get some pretty good views and watch time interviewing podcasters. But thanks for the email. And if you have a question on the music industry that you'd like for me to answer, just go to MatthewRicks.com, click submit your question, give me as many details as possible, and we'll answer it here on the channel. By the way, new Mattrix Minute's coming out on social media this weekend, so be on the lookout for that. But until next time, I will talk to you later.